And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, Indiana defeats Iowa 93-86. It's another win for Indiana over a ranked team in Assembly Hall. I gotta say, it was just a fun game. You know, I really we haven't had a game like this in a while that's up and down. I know the defense wasn't great in the first half, but just a fun game on both sides, made all the more fun because Indiana was able to close out the victory there late, exercise some of those Penn State demons, and get a win that, hey, you know what? It keeps whatever slim hopes that there are of this team getting back on the bubble before the end of the regular season. It keeps those hopes alive. So that's what happened tonight. Indiana wins 93-86. Typically, this is the point in the show where I open up with my banner moment, give you an opening thought about this game, but on a night when Will Sheehey goes for 30 points, I think it's only fitting that this episode of the Assembly Call starts with Will Sheehey's #1 fan and #1 critic, Ryan Phillips. So, Ryan, you lead us off with your rant, which I presume after a game like tonight is going to be about Will Sheehey.
Yeah, honestly, I feel a bit like a proud papa, and honestly, I am going to take full credit for all of my criticism of Will Sheehey finally paying off with a big win. Frankly, how awesome was it? It really came full circle for Sheehey because the dunk he had against Iowa, I believe he was a freshman, where he had that amazing dunk down the lane that was a top 10 on SportsCenter and all that stuff. And that was at home against Iowa, and really was probably the best non-Oladipo-centric dunk we've seen in a few years for Indiana. And his senior year at home, he winds up with 30 points, just dominated the game. He was the best player on the floor, no question. I thought in both halves. Really, you got to give him credit. He took some ill-advised threes, but when you're making that many shots from everywhere on the floor, you're allowed some leeway. So for Will, 30 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, only 2 turnovers. He was 13 to 20 from the field. He was just active on both ends of the floor and really did a great job. And the problem is, and the thing is, and the reason why why we all harp on this so much is that he can do this. We know he can do this. He's that talented, and this kind of game, we would have loved to see more of it during his career because, and we've had some great games from Will, but this was clearly the best game of his career, and he's a guy that absolutely has the ability to have games like this. So maybe the light has gone on, and down the stretch, he's going to be this guy who the team can rely on to be aggressive and get things done and mix it up and use that energy and athleticism we know he has to really impact games. And I can't say anything bad about tonight's performance, and I'm very happy for Will.
All right, Andy, why don't you jump in here and give us your bottoms line on tonight's IU victory?
Yeah, I mean, for me, other than the obvious, great play of Sheehey, I remarked toward the end of the game, although I probably remarked this when there was a minute left, which was about 45 minutes ago, I think. But at the time, Yogi and Noah had combined for 8 points, and IU was up 7, and I think that ended up being the final margin. And I said the thing about this team, and maybe this is this team's identity, that it has a special way of making you think you don't know a damn thing about basketball, that as soon as you think that they have no chance of winning or you know what to expect, they do the complete opposite. Or to go back to Dumb and Dumber, you go and completely redeem yourself. So they've done that tonight. And I thought, outside of Sheehey, the play of the bench was just outstanding. You look at a game where Yogi and Noah don't score a ton of points, neither in double figures, combined for just 12, but in the second half alone, I think IU had 20-some bench points, and for the game, doing some quick math here, it looks like 44. Is that right? Maybe that's not quick math. Hopefully it's correct math at least, but 42. I was close.
42, yeah, 42.
And I mean, you really look at up and down the roster, everybody that played made some kind of positive contribution one way or another, both starters and on the bench. And I think you look at a guy like Stan Robinson, who, made 7 of 10 from the line, which was huge for him, but 5 out of 6 from the floor, and really came in, in the first half and gave a good spark, got the start in the second half and kept that going. And Evan Gordon, for as much as you gave me a hard time about how bad he played in the first half, you neglected to say that you were also bad-mouthing him when we spoke at halftime, which I thought was great. But
I was just trying to get you riled up, Andy.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I thought he made some good plays, stepped up and hit free throws down the stretch, and the banked-in three really seemed to, as odd as it seems, a shot that was not shot all that well and banked in, seemed to give him a lot of confidence on both ends of the floor for the rest of the game. And really just a great team effort by these guys tonight, and a good bounce-back win on a short turnaround, and game would have been pretty easy to pack it in.
Just a terrific win. I mean, it's a terrific win, and I think everybody's got to be really happy about this. I mean, if you can't enjoy the wins, why be a fan? And I know that this season has been disappointing, and still this win only puts us at 6-9 in the conference, and we're not even on the bubble yet, and we're only 16-12. But you got to step back and enjoy a win like tonight, because after that second half, Indiana played against Wisconsin. My girlfriend came home tonight, and she got home about 5 minutes before the game, and she asked me, "How are you feeling?" And I said, you know what? I don't know. It changes every 5 minutes. 1 minute I think we're going to win by 10. The next minute I think we're going to lose by 20, because I don't know what team is going to show up. And if you had told me that Yogi and Noah are going to combine for 12 points and, we're going to win by 7, I would have said you were crazy. But, Andy, like you said, I mean, that's this team's identity is they kind of – it's almost that they don't have one. Like you don't know what to expect from game to game, and they kind of make you feel crazy a little bit. For my opening statement, I want to highlight what Stan Robinson did. And Andy, you touched on this a little bit, but I want to go back to the beginning of the second half, because I thought it was a really important stretch for Indiana. Indiana, I have the numbers right here. I think Indiana went on a 41-25 run in the first half. This is after Iowa jumped out to that 10-2 lead. And then Iowa closed out the first half very well, ended up leading by 3. And then if you include the beginning of the second half, which if you remember back that far, Iowa came out and extended their lead up, I think, to 7. I think it was 58-51 was the biggest their lead got. But it was a 15-2 run. And it very easily could have been more of the same for Indiana at that point. The one change that Indiana made in the second half was starting Stan Robinson, Andy, as you mentioned. And I thought Stan really kept Indiana in it there early in the second half, because I think Noah was pressing a little bit early in the second half and it didn't do much in the first half at all. I don't even know if he registered a shot attempt, and had a couple of bad possessions there early. Hoosiers weren't able to get anything going. Stan was able to get a couple buckets, get to the line, kind of stem the tide a little bit, keep it from being a huge Iowa run, and then Indiana was able to relax, go on the run to get the lead, which they never really relinquished. But I think it's very telling that Tom Crean was able to recognize at halftime. We've talked about his lack of adjustments, and so if we're going to criticize the halftime adjustments, we have got to laud this adjustment, which is putting Stan Robinson in over Austin Etherington in the second half. Not because Austin played poorly. I thought Austin did some good things in the first half, but this was a game tailor-made for Stan Robinson. He scores his career high. I mean, he showed it. But a wide-open game like this where the lane is open, this is a game really tailor-made for him. And I thought early in the second half he was very key in keeping the early part of the second half from getting away from Indiana like it has in the past. And by the time the under 12-minute timeout came around, Indiana had actually outscored Iowa, regained the control, and they never really relinquished it. So I really thought that was important. An important adjustment that both Stan Robinson and Tom Crean need to be given credit for. Okay, let's talk more about some of the individual performances that we saw tonight. And Andy, I think it's only fair to go back to you, and let's talk a little bit more about Evan Gordon, because it's funny because we heard a lot before the game how Evan was out there 2 hours before the game. He's getting up shots, and then he comes out in the first half. He wants no part of shooting, even though he got some wide-open looks, turned the ball over 3 times. And you're right. You and I talked at halftime about how he was basically doing nothing. But in the second half, he really turned it around. I think he only had 1 turnover in the second half, and he ends up scoring 12 points, all of them coming in the second half, I believe. He's 7 of 8 from the free throw line. He helps steady the team late, when you've got a Penn State-type lead late in the game, and we know what happened there. He helped to maintain the team's poise. Talk a little bit more about how he contributed to this IU victory.
Yeah, it really was a tale of two halves for him. I mean, like you said in the first half, he passed up a couple wide open shots and really just looked a lot like he did in the Wisconsin game where we talked about, it seemed like just guys were, scared to shoot, scared to make plays, scared to make mistakes, whatever you want to say. And I thought he really carried that over to the first half. And then, like I said, it seemed like as soon as that three went in, that he kind of had to shoot as he was just wide open, finally shot, banked it in. Not long after that, he made a nice drive to the basket and scored a layup that was, reminiscent of some of the things he did in the Wisconsin and Michigan games, and just seemed to, drew a charge. And I know Dockage on the game really, praised him for the defense he played on Marble in the second half, and just seemed like, that shot gave him a ton of confidence, or something gave him a ton of confidence that he just didn't exhibit any of in the first half, and really turned around. And also, even late in the game was you guys stepping up to get the ball and went to the line with confidence and went 7 of 8 from the line. So thought a really good performance for him. And I think, I feel like for a lot of guys, Sheehey, the one thing I tweeted out was I think, fair or unfair, a lot of people expected Sheehey to play like this all year, and I'm not sure that's really who he is and was a fair expectation for him, but he showed that tonight. I think Gordon played tonight like a lot of people had hoped that he would be able to as a veteran presence, and overall just thought he whatever it was, whether it was that shot or something else, really gave him a lot of confidence, and he just kind of built on it and really things snowballed for him from there.
Ryan, I want to talk a little bit about Noah Vonleh. And after the Northwestern game, after the Wisconsin game, both games where Noah had double-digit shot attempts, and this has been something that we've wanted to see from him, more shot attempts. You look at tonight, and, there was one NBA lottery pick on the court tonight. There were 16 other players that played in this game that took more field goal attempts than Noah Vonleh. And here's my impression, and I want to get yours, which is, and I love Noah. I mean, I think he's one of the most talented freshmen I've ever seen. I really put this performance on him. This, to me, just looked like kind of one of those games we've seen from him where he struggles to get in the rhythm. He presses a little bit at a certain point, and he's just never quite able to even really get a feel for the game. And I thought, and look, obviously it didn't hurt Indiana because they still won by 7, but a disappointing performance from Noah, but one I think that is more on him than it is on the scheme, his teammates, or the coaches, which is where some of the accountability has been placed in previous games. Do you agree?
Yeah, it was clear he just never got comfortable in the game. I mean, his one made field goal came with less than a minute to go off, a rebound off of a missed free throw. And he clearly was never comfortable in the game. He never got himself into the flow. I just thought he was hesitant the entire game, and he wasn't great at. I think also with an up and down game, I mean, he is not Cody Zeller as far as having that singular drive to run the floor and get to the rim immediately. I mean, not saying he doesn't hustle or doesn't run, but Cody had a special ability as far as just knowing when to take off and how to get himself open in transition, and Noah's not there yet. And so in an up and down game like that it might not be the best fit for him right now. And so I think that had a lot to do with it. He did grab some key rebounds in the second half, I thought, and played fairly well on defense, but it was just an uneven game from him, and he clearly was not ever really comfortable in the flow of the game, and that showed. I mean, but again, we forget with guys like Noah because of how talented they are. He is a freshman, and games like this happen, and it's something that it's a reality that a lot of people don't want to accept, but it's absolutely true. He had a tough one, and that happens, and hopefully he watches film, figures out what the problem was, and bounces back. We clearly didn't need him for a win tonight, so hopefully he'll be focused and ready to go for the next one.
Well, and here's the thing about Noah is that he doesn't compound a poor night by making it a 1 for 10. It's a 1 for 2 because he's not going to force things. He just kind of doesn't get in the flow, but he did contribute. I mean, you look at his numbers, he did, like you said, he had some key rebounds. He ended up with 5 rebounds. He had 3 steals. He had 2 blocks. I mean, Noah still did things that contributed to this team's victory. I think it was just a little bit disappointing after seeing his aggressiveness against Northwestern and Wisconsin, not quite seeing that in a game like tonight where there were so many points scored. But, again, just, another game in his evolution. Andy, I want to talk to you about the numbers. As I look through the stats, there's a few numbers that jump out. Iowa out-rebounded Indiana, both on the offensive glass and the defensive glass tonight. We can talk about that if you want to, because that's been a little bit of a trend that we've seen in some of these games. But to me, the number that really jump out is the turnovers and the assists. Now, you look at the raw turnover numbers, and Indiana had 17. Clearly, that's too many. It was 21% of their possessions, which is more than you want. But like Ryan and I talked about before the show, some of that was just the up-and-down nature of the game. And there were only a few that you look at as you have so many turnovers this season and think, man, those are just terrible unforced turnovers. I thought even though there was a high cumulative number, you have to take that with a grain of salt, especially when you consider that Indiana had 16 assists, which is so many more than they have normally had this year, and they were spread out. I mean, Yogi had 4, Stan had 3, Evan had 2, Austin had 2, Will had 3, which really showed that, Indiana was moving the ball. This wasn't a lot of one-on-one play. They were getting good shots. They were able to get shots at the rim because they were passing the ball. And we've seen that when Indiana has a high assist-to-turnover ratio, and even though it was less than 1 tonight, it was still better than it's been in a lot of games, that has correlated to success for this team. So for me, that's a number that jumps out. Comment, if you will, on that stat specifically, and then anything else that jumps out for you.
Yeah, I mean, to touch on the rebounding real quick, I think a lot of that was, it seemed like IU went with smaller lineups a decent amount in the second half, where you had, Robinson, Gordon, and Yogi out there at the same time, and even some other times when Vonleh was out, they were playing Hollowell at the 5 and things like that. So I think Iowa's a pretty good rebounding team as it is, and have a decent size up front. So I thought it was more matchup related than anything. In terms of the turnovers, I mean, I would kind of echo what you said. You look at how fast the game was played. There were certainly some careless ones mixed in there. Some of that I think you chalk up to the pace of the game. And ultimately, I think if IU gets in this kind of game, you're probably more willing to live with that when you have a grinded out half-court type contest where they're making some of these turnovers. Certainly, I don't know. I guess it just makes it feel worse, at least as you watch it. And then assist-wise, looking at some of the post-game comments from the players, Sheehey talked about really wanting to get out and run with them and have guys run to the corners and space the floor, and he did a good job of getting up the middle. And I think a lot of times the way that the half-court offense tends to run, you're typically going to get assists if a guy knocks down a jump shot where you drive and kick and things like that. And I think that probably contributes quite a bit to the low assist totals this team's seen this season in terms of how how poorly they've shot the ball versus this game where you were able to get a lot more guys on the run and in transition, and really a lot of those assists led to easy baskets as opposed to jumpers. So they're just, I guess the assist numbers in this were a little bit more reliant on higher percentage shots for the team. So definitely good. I thought they did a good job of sharing the ball. I think they still continue to struggle when the game did slow down a little bit in the half court, but I think it speaks to what we all probably have thought at various times this season, that this team's best chance to really look better offensively is to get out and run because of the lack of shooters and ability to really kind of spread people out in a half court game.
When you have a game like this where Indiana scores 93 points, they're 1.15 points per possession. In a season when points have been so hard to come by, it's very easy to focus on that. And I think that makes it also very easy to bury the lead, which we may have done tonight. And Ryan, I want to talk with you about this. We actually talked about it a little bit before the show started. Indiana's defense in the second half was outstanding. You can look at the raw numbers. Iowa scored 52 points in the first half. They scored 34 points in the second half. And if you look at the rate numbers, Iowa was at 1.18 points per possession in the first half. They finished at 1.07. So, you can see the improvement, and it wasn't just the numbers. I mean, as you're watching the eye test, Indiana passed it, I thought they played more physical. I thought there were fewer of those instances where you see guys running down to the other end of the court and kind of looking confused. Early in that first half, Iowa was basically dribbling and getting layups anytime they wanted to. And that was really shut off. And I think Indiana did give up some open three-point looks in the second half, but they shut off some of, not all of, but some of those open layups that they had been giving up. Comment, if you will, on that defensive improvement and maybe what adjustments you saw. And Andy, we can get you on this too. What adjustments you saw in that second half that helped Indiana really shut down basically the best and most consistent offense in the Big Ten in the second half?
Yeah, I think that really what they did was they got out and they pressured Iowa more instead of sort of waiting for Iowa to make a move and being back on their heels. They really, they were going over screens instead of under. They were really, you know, bumping guys on cuts. Just more of an aggressive mindset, and I really thought that was evident from, I would say, probably about 3 minutes into the second half. I thought they came out of the second half a little confused. Iowa really took it to them to start the first couple possessions of the second half. But then after that, I really felt that they locked in and were more aggressive, sort of were less, waiting for Iowa to do something than they were to just sort of make an impact. And I thought that was a big deal for what set the tone for the entire second half. I thought that it was just tougher for Iowa to get where it needed to, the Hawkeyes to get where they needed to go. And when you're aggressive like that, it affects all aspects of your game, especially when you start on defense with aggressiveness.
Andy, do you have anything to add as far as the defense goes?
No, I mean, just one kind of quick stat thing. I think I had tweeted this out. They were about 16 and a half minutes into the second half. They'd only given up 20 points, so the final numbers look a little bit worse because of some of the free throws and the marathon end of the game. But definitely felt like they just didn't give up the same number of layups, and they did a better job of contesting shots. The first part of the game looked like a glorified layup line when Iowa scored in their first 5 possessions, and I don't think took a shot outside of 3 feet from the basket. So definitely did a much better job of cutting those things off and making them make a little bit tougher shots. Marvel in particular, they did a good job of keeping him out.
You know what I really like about this game and a show like tonight is so often I'll be trying to find guys who that we can talk about in a positive sense, and a lot of games this year there haven't been that many. And as I'm looking through the box score tonight, there's a lot of guys that I want to comment on. I mean, Austin Etherington had 7 points and a couple assists, and I thought really had a couple of key buckets. Troy Williams, he only had 2 points and 4 boards, and I thought was shaky early, but was really active in certain stretches of the game and helped Indiana defensively. The guy that I want to talk about, and I want to get both of your thoughts on him, is Yogi Ferrell. Because, he's one of those guys, he scores so much, he does so much for this team that a lot of times when he puts up, 18, 20, 25 points, we take it for granted a little bit. I think a game like tonight, it's easy to overlook his contributions. He only had 8 points. He did have 4 assists. He did have 2 steals. He did have 2 rebounds. Obviously played a lot. He only took 6 shots. And I think it was really smart of him to only take 6 shots. What we didn't see from Yogi tonight was a lot of the forced threes. A lot of those shots, he did make one pull up, and it was one of those, as soon as he pulled up for it, I was like, count that one. It went in, of course. But, he didn't force those shots. He didn't take those shots early in the shot clock that you can get any time. He really got his teammates involved. And on a night like tonight when Will was playing well and Stan was playing well and even Evan in the second half was playing well, Yogi was okay taking a little bit of a backseat, getting those guys involved, not forcing shots. And I thought tonight he almost did as much with his restraint, in a way, I guess that's the word, that he has done in other games by forcing it when we've needed him to. And Andy, let me go to you with this, because I know, dating back even to last year, you remarked how when Yogi took a lot of shots on last year's team, it was not a good thing for this for that team. This year, obviously, he has needed to. Tonight was one of the first games all season where Indiana has played well, they've won, and Yogi not only hasn't taken a lot of shots, he hasn't needed to take a lot of shots. And to me, I thought it showed a lot of restraint, a lot of maturity, a lot of leadership on his part to recognize that, not force things, and let his teammates do a lot of the heavy lifting on offense.
Yeah, I think the tempo had a lot to do with it as well. I think you see when IU gets in some of these half-court games where the offense boils down to, at some point, him just with the ball in his hands toward the end of the shot clock and needing to make a play, and ends up taking shots there almost out of necessity. I mean, there's some each game with most guys you could second guess and think maybe that's not a great shot in that situation. But I do think a lot of it had to do with the tempo, where other guys were able to get out. He was able to facilitate a little bit more just in that tempo, as opposed to really getting bogged down in the half court when they've struggled so much offensively. And I think if you look at so many possessions, it feels like it ends up, running a weave around the top of the key and doing different things like that, where he ends up with a ball in his hands and they're just trying to get him to make a play, and everybody, like we said, after the last game, it feels like at times guys are standing around the half court like waiting on him to do something. And I think in a game like tonight, where he had a lot of guys get out and be able to run and get some shots and go through the net early, it helped them get some confidence. I think it really just helped him feel a little bit less of that burden to kind of do everything, as it feels like has been the case most of the season.
Another guy I also thought played some good minutes was Devin Davis. He had 4 points. He had one emphatic block that was terrific, 2 rebounds, and again, no turnovers. That's been one of the more impressive things about Devin recently, is he's been able to take care of the ball better. Ryan, do you want to give some quick comments on Devin Davis?
Well, I just think that with Devin Davis, he's kind of been a forgotten man this year a little bit, because he got some playing time early, and then sort of as the rotation tightened up, he sort of got lost in the shuffle. But he's a guy who's going to be a 4-year player for IU, and I think that just because he isn't playing doesn't mean that he's not a good player. I mean, I've heard, or seen some things on Twitter, people saying, "Where's Devin Davis? Is he just, not as good as they thought he was going to be?" Things like that. Well, no, guys like he and Colin Hartman are making the transition to college basketball. It's not we've seen some guys like Yogi, and we've been fortunate enough to have guys like Yogi and Cody Zeller and Vonleh who just pick it up and go and are starters. But Davis is a guy, you've also, to have your program be successful, you've also got to have guys who you're developing. And both of those guys are 2 guys that I think are going to be big-time players for IU when it rolls around to their junior and senior years. Davis is transitioning from being a post player to probably being a small forward in Indiana. Maybe he'll get some minutes of power forward in open sets. So he's learning how to be a shooter. He's learning how to do all these, other things that he didn't have to do in high school. But the thing you got to love about him is when he comes in, he's a huge, high-energy guy. He's big, he's athletic, and he just doesn't stop when he's on the floor. He's got a great motor. And, yeah, tonight he had a really nice game. I mean, and he gave some great minutes. I mean, that was a time in the game where the game was not decided yet. He had a couple of really nice rebounds. He had 4 points. And you didn't feel like he was overmatched in the game. And that's big for the future of this program, because, whoever comes and goes, you're going to have guys like that you're developing sort of in the background. And that's the luxury when you recruit really well, is you don't have to throw those guys into action right away. You can develop them and get them better. And I'm excited to see what he does. Mostly next year, because I don't think he's going to be a guy who gets 10, 15 minutes a game at the end of this year. But I thought tonight it was really promising to see him go out and look like he belonged in Big Ten basketball.
All right, quick, both of you unmute yourselves. Don't look at your box score. Who took the second most shots for Indiana tonight?
Oh,
Hollowell.
I did just look at it. It was Hollowell. He was 2 for 8.
Yes. Okay.
I didn't look. I was looking at it already. I didn't just blatantly disregard what you asked us to do.
I know. So, and I want to get both your guys' thoughts on him too. And I'll go to Ryan first, and then Andy, I'll go to you. But Jeremy Hollowell tonight, 7 points. He was 2 for 8 from the field, so not an efficient shooting night. But he had 4 boards. He had an assist. He had 2 steals. I was impressed with him, and it continues. Really what I've seen from him, I think his first game back was maybe the Penn State road game, or I don't know, that sounds too, I don't know. The first time I really remember him making a big impact was that game at Minnesota, when he really had a big first half. And I think we've seen signs in each game since then where his aggressiveness is starting to come back a little bit. And sometimes we've seen that on the offensive end, but I think we've seen it a lot on the defensive end, just with him being more active, being more alert, grabbing more rebounds. I thought tonight he did a lot of that. And, a couple of those shots that he missed were layups that he could have made. Dan Dockich had a great quote that, hey, if all you're doing is missing layups, you're in pretty good shape. That's why I liked Hollowell's game tonight, because I think for him to become the player that we want him to be, first the aggressiveness has to come back, and then the confidence has to come back that some of those shots are going to start falling. And, yeah, he jacked up that one kind of 18-foot shot maybe early in the shot clock, and he had a couple drives where you cringe a little bit only because you're remembering old Jeremy Hollowell. But for us to eventually get to hopefully new, improved Jeremy Hollowell, the guy we thought we were getting when we recruited, I feel like we're going to have to go through a few of those moments where he's aggressive without getting the result, and then eventually the result's going to come. And I thought a game like tonight, it's up and down. A lot of those shots came within the flow of the offense. I, frankly, was really impressed, really encouraged with what I saw from him. And despite the 6 missed shots, I thought he did enough other things. I mean, diving for loose balls, trying to take charges. I thought he did enough other things where he really contributed to this victory. And to me, it was really nice to see the aggressiveness come back. Ryan, I want to get your thoughts and also yours, Andy, because this is a guy who is a really, really important piece for this program the next 2 years.
Yeah, what I thought the key was for Hollowell, and maybe has been the last few games, he looks like he's enjoying himself. He looks like he's having fun playing basketball. And I think that's huge for a guy who just for a long time looked like it was almost like the pressure just got to him. And he just did not look like he was, he forgot he was playing a game. And tonight, he had the 7 points, 4 rebounds and assists, 2 steals, no turnovers. He was 2 away from the field, but I mean, I really can't complain about too many of those shots. I thought he took one where he was sort of falling away, but he gets a little more height on that shot and it goes in and it's a great shot. But his aggressiveness on both ends of the floor. I mean, this is a guy who has so much talent that if he's just aggressive, he's going to back into points, and he's going to back into rebounds and assists and steals and things like that. It's a matter of confidence and consistency, and that's something that's got to develop for him to be. Both of those traits need to develop for him to be a key player for us. But I thought tonight he looked confident, and he looked like he was enjoying himself out there, which is huge. I mean, it's gigantic. You can't underestimate how when a kid just gets rid of the pressure and lets it fall off his shoulders and finally just starts playing the game, how much they can improve and how quickly they can improve.
Yeah, I thought a couple plays stood out to me with him. There were a couple times where he did take shots where it didn't seem like a great shot, but he seemed to come back on a couple occasions where he made a bad play or did something else. He came down and grabbed a rebound in traffic, or he did something well defensively. So, I think the word we used for him a lot earlier in the season was fragile, and I didn't feel like he played that way tonight. If he made a mistake, he didn't hang his head. He ran back down the floor and made something happen. And I thought he was one of the guys who really defensively I thought did a good job. He was asked to defend a lot of different players, and I felt like he did really well there, and I actually was a little bit surprised he didn't have more than 4 rebounds because it felt like he came up with a couple big ones when it seemed like the tide might turn a little bit and managed to make a play. And I think you even saw, I think toward the end of the first half, he kind of cleared other guys out of that side of the floor and got him the ball in the post, maybe not necessarily in the post, but 10, 12 feet from the basket, and he made a nice play. And I think seeing some of that confidence from the rest of the guys on the team probably goes a long way with somebody like him, who we've talked about. Mindset is so important, and confidence and things like that. So definitely good to see him build on these last couple strong performances and keep that up tonight. And I think he's kind of settling into maybe not what some of the higher end expectations were for the season, but again, I think if you had looked back at the beginning of the year and said you're going to get 7, 8 points and 4 rebounds out of him, most people would have taken that as a complimentary player. He's not at a point where he can be a star for this team and a focal point, but I do think he's really made pretty good strides over these last handful of games. I thought tonight was another really good step on both ends of the floor. Since with him, offense gets talked about more, but I thought defense and rebounding, I thought he did a really nice job too.
Yeah, and I actually thought the sequence I was the most impressed with is after he kind of jacked that one 18-foot shot, and again, it was early in the shot clock, it was off 1 or 2 dribbles, the shot selection's questionable, but what he did when he came down there is what impressed me. On the other end of the court is Iowa missed a shot, and if you watch the film, Jeremy literally comes all the way from the other side of the court and grabs the rebound. And it was impressive hustle. It was a kind of hustle and focus and just care. And really, Ryan, like you said, you hit it on the head, joy. He looks like he's having fun again, and that's when you make plays like that. And again, with him, it's some of those little things, reading the body language, reading the activity, but I'm encouraged, And so as we go through the end of the season, Andy, I'm going to direct this next question at you. As we go through the end of the season now, there's really kind of 2 things that we're playing for, right? We're playing for momentum, development, growth that we can carry into next season, but we're also playing for that very, very small as it may be probability that this team can still somehow achieve its goals that we set for it in the preseason, okay? And when we talked a long time ago back in the preseason, we said, hey, if this team can finish 500 or a game or two over that in the Big Ten and, kind of sneak into the NCAA tournament, that's a successful year for this team. And I think we've all reset our expectations a little bit based on, what's happened, especially after the Purdue game. We reset the expectations, that now maybe getting to the NIT and maybe getting to, 6-7 wins. But as we sit right now, 6-9 in the conference, 16-12 overall, I kind of laid out on the site tonight that, hey, we've got 3 road games coming up. 2 are against ranked teams in Iowa and Ohio State, if Ohio State will still be ranked after losing to Penn State tonight, and then Nebraska. If Indiana can somehow win those 3 games, okay, and we did that first step tonight, is it possible that the last game of the Big Ten season on the road against Michigan in Ann Arbor, we're playing for a spot in the NCAA tournament? Because if we can win these next 2 games, we're 18-12, we're playing to be 19-12, we're playing to be 9-9 in the conference, and again, this team's got to win the next 2 games. But Andy, as we kind of look for hope, on a night like tonight and beating a ranked team at home, I think it's warranted to at least look for hope. What is now possible for this team? If we can just take care of business at home against Ohio State and Nebraska, is it possible that we can get ourselves back on the bubble and get back in NCAA tournament consideration?
I feel like you're just setting me up to be the resident curmudgeon here who just throws cold water on everything. But I'll say so. I'll go back to some of the stuff when I sent something to you about this on Twitter earlier today. I'm trying to get back to it. It wasn't good. I don't know. So what it is right now. So I'm looking at kind of updated, RPI and those kinds of numbers. So right now, I use RPI as 86, which is pretty far out of what you'd normally factor in as considered for the tournament. They're 3-9 away from home, with no real notable road wins. I mean, the road wins are Northwestern, Penn State, and then the neutral court win over Washington. So those aren't really that impressive. And the only road game left on the schedule at this point, which is good for IU's hopes, but not necessarily good for their resume, is the one at Michigan. They're 10-12 against the RPI top 200. So obviously winning those couple games you mentioned would get them to 500 against that. But I know as I go through and kind of do bracketology and look at some of the teams that are on that, end mark, I always question, like, is a team that really is barely above 500 against the top 200, really worth inclusion there? Non-conference strength of schedule is in the 120s, if not. I think it's a lot higher than that. That's what I was trying to look back and find. And so I just think there are, a lot of factors that are not in their favor. And even though this has been a week where, probably 3 out of 4 bubble teams have lost their games as opposed to won them, I just don't know how a team that has, 4 sub-100 losses, hasn't beat anybody in non-conference, hasn't beat anybody away from home, is really going to be able to do that. I think it would take a pretty strong showing in the Big Ten tournament, which has, been something IU's struggled in. It feels like really since the advent of the Big Ten tournament, would probably be necessary. So I'm not here to say that there's absolutely no chance, but I think it's pretty distant at this point, and especially when you look at, IU hasn't won 3 games in a row, let alone 4 since November. It makes it seem somewhat unlikely that the scenario you referenced plays out. But with this team, again, like I said, they make you feel like you don't know a whole lot about basketball at times. So perhaps we'll find out some more things that we didn't know in these next few games.
Okay, and Ryan wants to jump in with a question. I do want to say, Andy, I did not mean to set you up as the IU basketball curmudgeon, anything like that, but you are basically the official bracketologist for Fox Sports. I mean, and your picks have been very, very solid, very consistent. And that's why I asked you, because you know this stuff better than me. My job is to try and, find hope against all hope. So if I can find the area for a 1% chance to give us hope and create this crazy scenario, I'm going to do it. I just like for you to tell me if it's at all reasonable. So anyway, Ryan, I know you have a question you want to ask Andy. So
yeah, Andy, do you think momentum would play into it at all? I mean, if we did win our last 3 games, I mean, obviously it's a far-fetched scenario, but let's say we won our last 3 games, and maybe won a game or two in the Big Ten tournament. Do you think that, and we got to 20 wins, I guess would be at that, do you think that momentum would play any factor into the selection or no? I'm asking because I don't know how that works.
Well, they're in years past, and I forget when they've kind of come out and tried to formally say that this doesn't matter. For a while, there was always a lot of emphasis placed on here's what your record is in your last 10 games and all those kinds of things, and that supposedly at some point held more weight. Whether it did or didn't, I don't know that anybody really knows. The committee has kind of come out and tried to reiterate it's the body of work, it's not your last 10 games, it's not this, that, or whatever. So to the extent that said, I guess it wouldn't matter. I think human nature plays a factor in it, though, where you're going to look at teams and say, they are playing well right now, and not that you write off some of the other things, but that might be something that would set you apart from somebody else, and so I think that could be a factor. Even though if you asked anybody who was on the committee, they'd say that it wouldn't be. I think there's just a part of human nature that's going to let that at least kind of creep into the subconscious and look at some of that. So it shouldn't matter, but it probably would.
Right, gotcha.
Okay, I don't know if you guys are following Twitter, but you know what?
I've heard of it.
I know. Not in general. I'm talking about right now. A couple tweets just caught my eye. One from a guy you might remember, Vic Oladipo. Congrats to the bro Will Sheehey on the career high today in the win. #Feathery, #IUBB. Another one from another guy you might remember, Cody Zeller. So happy for Will. One of the best teammates I've ever had. That dude just loves to compete and win. I love the fact that those two guys are watching this game late at night, this rescheduled game, and tweeting about Will. I just think it's great. I think those two guys, just the leaders that they were last year, I don't know. It's great. Ryan, any comments real quick on that while I collect myself? Because I think it's great to see those guys still caring about the program.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing. I know a lot of people have problems with Tom Crean, but the one thing he's built is a real family atmosphere around the program, and these guys are close, and those guys specifically went through a lot together, and I think they're always going to be like that. I think it's one of those things where it's a life-changing experience playing basketball for Indiana, and you develop those bonds that don't go away. And so, of course, they're going to be there and watching as much as they can with their schedule. And it's great to see, and it's one of those things where I don't think those two guys will stop watching once Will is gone. I think that's something where they'll be attached to the program forever, and they'll be commenting on it for as long as they can.
All right. Well, as we get prepped here for our final thoughts, Indiana's next game is coming up. Let's see here.
Sunday,
right?
4 Eastern, I believe.
Against Ohio
Sunday,
State, yes?
Yep.
Ohio State first and then Nebraska?
That is correct.
All right, so Andy, give us your quick, kind of half-baked 60-second preview of IU Ohio State. This is a team that was ranked 22nd coming into tonight. We know they've been offensively challenged, and they just lost in Happy Valley to Penn State. What's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think it'll be a different kind of challenge for IU. So you saw tonight an Iowa team that really has struggled defensively in the last few weeks, particularly in the last few games. And IU really was able to take advantage of both their defensive struggles and being able to play at a bit faster tempo. Ohio State, on the other hand, is really good defensively and not very good on the offensive end, as evidenced tonight, where they really just had trouble scoring against Penn State, at least in the parts that I watched, and that's kind of been a constant struggle for them this season. So in that regard, I think it's going to be important for IU's defense to step up early and not let them gain some confidence. I do think it's going to be that much more of a struggle for an IU team that has had its fair share of struggle scoring this season to go up against a really good defensive team. And so you're sure you'll hear plenty about Aaron Kraft probably on Yogi, but you'll also see Shannon Scott's a really good defender. I think he'll probably see some time there. And I think in that regard, the turnover thing obviously creeps into everybody's mind about how to take care of the basketball against that kind of pressure. I think the good thing is that IU should at least go into the game feeling some confidence that they've shown an ability, at the very least in this game, to be able to win a game in which Yogi didn't score very well, and didn't need to score well, and didn't need to shoot a ton. So I think if there's anything you kind of take away from tonight that might be helpful there, it's hopefully that some of these other guys have confidence, because I do think Ohio State, defensively is going to make it tough for him to score and to try to make other guys beat him. And at least for tonight, a number of guys stepped up to do that, and hopefully that carries over to Sunday's game.
Hey, one final question I have. I'll go to Ryan and Andy. If you want to jump in, let me know before we get to final thoughts. And I'm thinking about this because I'm seeing a tweet here from Zach Osterman, and it's a quote from Tom Crean from the postgame where he says that he's cut back on player workload, quote-unquote, considerably this season, says it's not something he would have done years ago. One criticism of Tom Crean has been that his teams fade late in the season. And we've even seen it anecdotally while he's been at IU, that teams have played really poorly in February. So I actually went back, and I need to turn this into a post. I actually went back and charted all of his teams from Marquette all the way up to even this season, and how they have fared in February and March, and how they've done in tournaments. And basically what the data shows is that when he's had good teams in February and March, they've played pretty well. 6-7 wins over that time. And when he's had really bad teams, like his first couple years in Indiana, they completely collapse. And when he's had decent teams, they play about 500 ball. He's never been very good in conference tournaments. His NCAA tournament record's been up and down. But I do think that his February-March, record, and that his teams fade late in the season, based on the data I saw anyway, has been a little bit overblown. Let me ask you, Ryan, as you see this team now, because, look, I know the season's been rough. I know that at the end of that Purdue game, things look bad. This team's played 5 really good halves of basketball out of their last 6. They've won a game on the road. They were leading by 10 on the road in Wisconsin, and tonight they beat a team at home that was ranked. So this team actually looks to be hitting its stride and getting better as we go late into the season. Do you think that maybe Tom Crean, lessening the workload a little bit has helped, and that perhaps, his inability to coach teams late in the season was a bit overblown? Do you think it's a combination of the two?
I do think it's a little overblown because, he's had teams that were wildly successful late in the season. I think a lot of it depends on that specific team. I don't think it's a blanket statement you can make. I think every year is different. I don't think that it's something you can make just an overarching statement looking at the data from far away. I think that it's something you have to examine, on a team-by-team basis. But what I really think happened to this team is it hit a wall, when it lost those 2 close games and they got blown out by Purdue. And lessening the workload, I think, when you have a young team is a lot more important than when you have veterans. It's the same as, veterans can play 35 minutes in a game if they need to and be fine. Guys who are 18 and 19 can't do that, and so I think when you've got so many young players contributing, you do need to lessen the workload because they're not used to dealing with that and dealing with not only high-intensity games but high-intensity college-level practices. People forget that these guys practice, and they practice hard, and so the idea of, it's only, 30 games or something along those lines, that's a misnomer because these guys are living it every single day, and it's not something they've done in the past. So I think that lessening the workload this year was important. I don't know if it's going to be an overarching thing for the program for the rest of his time here, but I think that it was a smart thing to do this year based on what he's got to work with, and he's got younger guys who haven't done it before. So I think it's a smart move. We'll see how it goes in the future, and if that's something that he opts to do as well.
Another great tweet from Eric Gordon. Good work, Lil Bro. Evan Gordon 10, knocking down those free throws. I don't know. I love seeing the old guys, especially the guys still in the NBA, still having solid careers, tweeting at the guys currently playing. With that said, Andy, let's go to you for final thoughts, then Ryan, and then I will close it out.
Yeah, I thought, obviously a great win for the team tonight. And the post I wrote up earlier this week, I guess it feels like longer ago because it was after the last game, but that was only 2 days ago, about some of the second half things with Crean. I kind of ended that with some general thoughts that, the gist of it was that it's okay to feel like there are things to criticize with this team and the coaching staff and different things like that, and you can do that and still be an ardent supporter of the team and get excited when they win and feel great for guys when they play well. and tonight's game kind of brought some of that full circle. We didn't see some of the things that we've seen this season. We saw a team take a punch from Iowa early in the second half and bounce back and really force it into a point in the game where Iowa's really struggled down the stretch of games. And so IU kind of stemmed the tide in the section of the game that they haven't played well, and put some pressure on Iowa down the stretch to really try to break a streak that they've had this season of not playing well. And I think you look at a game like this and it's hard not to just feel good for some of these guys who, as we've all talked about, work hard and deserve everybody's support no matter how frustrated we all get from time to time. And it's impossible not to feel good for Will Sheehey in what's a senior year that hasn't been anything like what he had hoped it would be, and what he wanted to be, and a guy who, while you can question some of the shot selection and the things like that as we do on here, but effort with him is never one that you question. And my wife said during the game, like, can they just have a senior night tonight? And it felt like
Man.
I don't think anybody would have complained if they went over the PA and said, look, we're going to go ahead and have his senior night tonight and let him give his speech after the game, because I thought this was the kind of performance. He made so many of the mid-range shots and did so many of the little things that have really made people come to like and appreciate him as a player. And just thought it was a great game for him, and you have to feel good for him and for guys like Gordon and for guys like Hollowell who have struggled at times this year to kind of put it together. So we're certainly past the point of trying to figure out what a game like this means and what this will translate to in the next time out. And I think we've kind of gotten to a point where with this season, it's maybe less about the big picture and just enjoying the steps along the way. And so thought tonight was a good way to do that, and felt really, really good and happy for these guys to be able to get a win. And in addition to doing away with halftime, I think we should just do away with road games too and say the hell with it. And I think maybe everything will just turn out just fine.
It'll be good. All right, Ryan, your final thoughts on an IU victory, an exuberant IU victory.
Well, we could just go the Boeheim / Calipari route and just never play true road games. I mean, we'll see what happens. See if anyone would accept that. Just a great win for the team. I mean, I mentioned at the end of the last podcast that these players get down more than we do when they lose, and it's harder for them, and so they deserve this win because they're working hard, they're doing what they can, and I thought it was a great game. I thought from start to finish it was not only just a great game but a confidence building game for a lot of guys on the roster. A lot of the guys played well. It wasn't just this wasn't the Michigan game where Yogi just carried us, and this was a lot of guys working and playing incredibly well. And it was really nice to see, and you got to feel great for Will Sheehey, as Andy said. He really, I think, best game of his career, and I thought it was really nice to see him step up when this team needed him, because they really needed him after that loss against Wisconsin. That could have been a crushing loss, and with the way the second half went, and I thought he stepped up and really played well, and that was great to see. Very happy for Will.
You know what? You guys really took the words out of my mouth. I mean, I'm just really proud of this team. And Andy, you're right. We're kind of past the point now of really being able to kind of look at the big picture. We've got to enjoy the steps along the way. Here's what I love about tonight's game. I don't know that this team came out tonight ready to play, but they came here ready to win, because they were down 10-2 before most people were even able to figure out what channel the game was on, thanks to the Kentucky-Arkansas game. And from that point forward, when it was 10-2, Indiana outscored Iowa by 15 points. Great timeout from Tom Crean early. I mean, Indiana just looked lethargic, looked like the game could get away from them. And from that point forward, they took a team that has been ranked all year, that is a Big Ten contender, that people are talking about as a Final Four contender, and they outscored them by 15 points. And it was great on an individual level with a lot of guys. It was great to see this team, after a lot of the negatives they've gone through, get another win like this. What does it mean? I don't know. They've still got to beat Ohio State. They've got to beat Nebraska. Get to that game in Ann Arbor where it might mean something and win that one. And then we can really start talking about that. I don't know. It's a crazy scenario. Who knows if it can happen? But just enjoy the victory. That's why we're here. That's why we're fans. We get down because of the losses, but enjoy the victory. And my goodness, this was a fun one. This was a well-earned one. And there's so much to be proud of, because every single guy who played, including Johnny Marlin, including Jeff Howard, all the guys who played tonight contributed in a positive manner. And that's what's great, is that, at the end of that Purdue game, this really looked like a fractured team. It looked like a team that had lost some of its togetherness, had lost some of its attitude. And 6 halves of basketball later, it looks like a team that has regained a lot of that has some of its leadership back, that has some of its mojo back, and that seems to be enjoying playing together. If anything, that's what I wanted to see from this team over these last 3 games, and that's what we've seen. Now let's see what they can do over the last 3 games, because the talent is there. The talent is definitely there. We've always known that. And maybe the thing that we always hoped way back in November is what's going to happen is that this team peaks at the end of the season. Because if they do, the talent is there, and they're capable of a lot of things. So keep an open mind, keep hope alive, keep supporting this team. I would hope that a win like tonight would earn that, because this team can still do some pretty good things this year. All right, everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. I thank Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips for co-hosting. I'm your host, Jared Morris. Make sure that you go to assemblycall.com/subscribe and get on our email list so that you get Andy's in-depth analysis. It's pretty late. It's 12:32, I think, where Andy is right now, so I don't know if you'll get one in the morning. If he's willing to send one tonight, I'm willing to send it out to you very early tomorrow morning. We will see. Regardless, join us Sunday after the Ohio State game. We will be here. We are here after every game. Assemblycall.com/live. We thank you for listening to us live. We thank you for listening to us on the podcast. Stick behind this team. Support them. Games like tonight, earn your trust, earn your respect. Now, hopefully, the Hoosiers can finish out the season strong. All right, everybody. Have a good night. We'll talk to you soon.